understand the publication process, realize the importance of selecting the appropriate journal for publication, the critical requirements for selection of each of those articles. Once you submit your article to any journal, what process does it undergo for you? If we have sufficient time, we will do this also. That's what I'm talking about. Before you start thinking of writing an article, it is necessary for you to understand the topic of study that you want to share out there for people to understand. And there must be a motivation behind why you are choosing your topic. You in health science and those in education and the many other faculties, if I use my example, for example, I'm in agriculture education, but agriculture education is too broad. Yes? Where is my niche? What is it that I want to share? What is my topic? Is it on pedagogy in agriculture? Or is it on innovative pedagogy in agriculture? Because pedagogy and it being innovative, those are totally different things. So what is your niche that you want to build on? What motivates you? Is it just a matter of having a paper? Or is it a matter of you being a renowned researcher for that case? Because you've come up with some findings that you want to share with the world out there. Then it's also important to understand the requirements. And this is where many times we fall off. What is required of me to say, I am now ready to publish an article? What exactly do I want to share? And on that journal where I want to publish, again, what are the requirements? So as a researcher, what are the requirements on myself as an individual or as a team, if we are publishing as a team, and what is the requirements as per the publishing journal that we end up selecting? And then lastly, it's also good to think of what options do you have. The journals are many, so many, but what are your best alternatives? And that's why you realize we all publish. But when you get to the authentic databases, you will never find any of your publications. And you ask yourself, where are my publications? Why are they not prescribed? Because probably you never chose the right journal to publish it. So you will forgive me for this. I like engaging my yes. And so in our groups, remember those groups that we had in the morning? Yes. Or you can form others, so that you continue networking. I realize as much as we're in the same school, some of us do not know each other. I noted that in the morning. So this interaction is meant to bridge that gap as well. I would want us to ask ourselves, when you think of publishing an article, why should you do it? Why do we publish? So can we have 5 groups this time now? Count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. 1, 3, 4. So group 1 before you will have more members. So groups 1 here, 2, 3, group 4, and 5 at the back. The task is there. Why should you publish? 5 minutes should be enough for that task. Remember, you will share, so among yourselves, pick a secretary. Two, three, four, five at the back.
Una concentrate na group inaonekana light sana hivyo hivyo. So usikusumbue sana na concept, bora tu uwafikishe head to
share with one what the findings of I'm giving an example. I've said maybe by the time so when I get there,
At some point, your publication it's a point or let me ask you, the money that people pay to access some publication, does it just all of it go for the journal? But the other some percentage that goes to the
I think the page is why so once you take it comes so that cost now for the agricultural which enables that now.
We were looking at also the cost of maybe someone who wants to read, for example, I wanted to read which of one journals must express to access those publications. So I'm asking if such percentage amount of the pay, is there a portion of it that goes to the one who publishes the one? Because that is the only point we can anchor on when we talk of
Can we get ready to present?
Channel. This now becomes famous. Wall Street
Vean hizo tatu zimetosha.
Time is up.
Pindukeni. Group 1 are presenting.
Okay, so the question is why we should publish. So one came up with 4 major points on why we publish. So number 1 is dissemination of knowledge. So normally if you go out and then you do your research and find that new knowledge you want to share with the rest of the world. And then number 2, as a requirement for promotion. Remember, right now, before you are promoted, you need what? Either you publish or you do what? And then also requirement for graduation, because you can't graduate without doing what? Publishing. And then remember, it's also an institutional requirement. Because you find that we have some institutions, not really some institutions, but we are also supposed to do what? To keep on doing what? Publishing as part of what? The requirement. And then another reason we found is for prestige. You just want to be seen like you have the same association and then you somebody goes to the scholar, you are there. Okay. And then another reason is for global recognition. So globally, you recognize as a researcher, and then this will lead to collaboration. And then remember, when you have collaboration, it's going to enhance what? Funding. So funding to the institution, and then as a person also you can benefit from that funding. Thank you.
And try as much as possible not to repeat what they've already mentioned.
These might be unintentional plagiarism. So I think from our group we had Madam Lee, we had myself, Trent and Kenneth. That is very important. We interact. So I think these points match theirs, but I have to provide them. One is to share the world, the findings of your research. That has already been captured. It's an academic requirement for graduation. Also to advance ideas for promotion, of course. Then 4 is self-actualization. Yeah, you might want to accomplish a number of publications in your career. Then 5 is merit for research funding. That is for grants. 6 is income generation. Definitely, this works for those that target to have some income from their published work. Then lastly is enhancing policy change. Thank you.
And then try as much as possible not to repeat it. Yeah, bring us what is new. Yes. Yeah, good afternoon. I'm going to repeat. Maximizing the research output for documentation purposes There's to publish for grant purposes, to get grants and to improve the quality of a given product. You research on a given product, you want people to do, so you publish for them to get their knowledge. What else? To improve our reputation, I think that one you say. To tax, punish for the author. But most of them they do. There are those who love publishing. Yeah. Because thank you.
Group 4. To save time, you clap for me because I have it water. Yes. We had 7, but they have not been.
It's not that yes, improving the reputation of the institution. It has not been mentioned, it has not been mentioned. And this data are talking of biometric ranking, and publication is part of what contributes to your biometric ranking of your institution. So these things we do, don't we? Yes. They yeah, group 5 found themselves 3, and then I dropped them out in the other groups. So next time we get into the project, make sure you go to your own group. Yeah. So when you go to those numbers, they have a meaning, eh? And we are saying as a researcher, you must be able to interpret it. So when I tell you say 3, it is not just 3. It will give it has an implication to it. Now, we publish for career progression. This is our institution status. As a way of organizing works that have been done and we want to share it out. We also publish to stop other people from taking credit of our own work. And this is where you have really been good experts in plagiarism and holding other people's work. Setting yourself a new challenge. And those of us who have published, and if you're published in a well-known journal, you look at the way people are citing your work. There is that intrinsic motivation to continue publishing and publishing. It becomes kind of an addiction. So it gives you that new challenge to keep doing or what you like doing. Then it also gives you personal satisfaction in achieving your new goal as a researcher. It is also a journey in the process. It gives you the opportunity to learn writing at higher standards. I'm very sure the first paper you wrote during your MSc and the one you wrote during your PhD, they are totally different. And the quality is eventually different. The language is different. So you keep growing in language. In terms of our students whom we supervise, it gives them the opportunity for their work to be recognized. And it also helps us develop our research profile. So when I look at your research profile, somebody would want to know how many papers have they published, where have they published those papers, how many times have their papers been published. The other day I saw in your institution a list being released for people, members and their articles and the number of citations they have acquired and all that. You feel good if you're among the top, but that does not mean that you compromise on the quality of your publication. Now, for you to publish appropriately, you must be very cautious of where you want to publish, the journal that you want to publish your work. And sometimes we do not wake up one morning and here we have
very sure that this is the journal that I want to publish my work in. You have to do some groundwork research on what alternatives there are now. And you may not have the experience. There are people who are more experienced than you. Sometimes as scholars, we do not want to appear to other people as if we do not know. We take seeking for advice or being guided as being less educated, which should not be the case. If you are scholars together, you have an opportunity to consult one another. And especially those of us who have more experience in publishing. Let them share with you where they are published, the impact factor of the journal that they have published, the publisher of the journal, and probably who are the editors of the journal. These are things that they can tell you. And when you think of where you want to publish, you must also think of who is the key person in this area. Who would you refer to as an authority? If I'm in the area of agriculture education, I should be knowing at least 2 persons who are an authority in that area of mine. So that I also look at where they publish. Yes, what kind of journals do they publish in? Because that will tell you there must be some good value in the journals they publish in. Identify the potential journals. This is a process of you having a way, finding your way into selecting an appropriate journal. And the librarians who are here, librarians have the opportunity to select the appropriate databases for our universities. And in these databases, we have journals within them in different disciplines. So that is another forum that you can follow to try to identify a journal of your area, and a journal that is acknowledged and recognized as being authentic. Then it's also necessary that you get to read through the aims and the scope, and also the statement of the journal that you finally land on. And sometimes our students do some mistakes, and we are not able to correct them at the end of the day because we fail in the way we guide them. If as a supervisor, I do not know the right journal to publish in, it will be very difficult for me to guide my own student on the appropriate journal to publish in. Is it true? Mm-hmm. And so we end up saying we have so many articles published, but they are in journals that are not recognized. They are in journals that are not peer reviewed. They are in journals that are referred to as predatory journals. Why do we find ourselves there? Because we don't take time to choose our appropriate journal, the journal that you're interested in appropriately. Selection of the journal is very important. Well, that is where it begins. If you fail in journal selection, you fail in the entire process. Your paper may be very good, but where are you taking it? Very crucial. When you're selecting this journal, it is necessary you get it clear, the relevance and the importance of your topic, that which you want to study. And one thing I should have mentioned is that when we want to publish, we are joining a team that is telling a story. And therefore, for you to fit in that team, your story must be complementing with what other people are telling about. You get it? So you don't get into that team and your story is totally the opposite of what they have been discussing. You join a discussion and you blend in the discussion. If you join that discussion and you are out of the scope, what happens? Nobody will recognize your work. So it is important you understand the relevance and the importance of what you want to present in your journal. It is also important you position your article within the right discipline. If you talk about education, for example, if you talk about health sciences, there are so many disciplines within them. Which is your core discipline?
and which journal focuses on publishing articles in that list. Then your theoretical framework, when you look at these journals, which we'll be looking, you will realize they have their requirements and they have their expectations. If they have a theoretical framework, that's yours in the item that the article or the manuscript that you want to present, speaking to what they already have existing in their expectations. The description has to be very clear in terms of the research design, the methods. We'll be looking at this later on. The relevance of your research results, what you are contributing to the new knowledge, which must come out very clearly so that your work is not a replica of what other people have done, or your work is not speaking to what other people have been doing within that very time. One of the things that you must always learn to do is read a few of the articles that have been published in the journal that you want to publish in, and see whether there is anything that is connecting with what you want to publish. Then you have to adhere to their technical requirements and also their style of writing. Every journal has its own style. It will give you their own requirements in terms of, even when you're doing the abstract, how many number of words, what should be in the abstract. If you're doing the entire book, what facts do you present in your article? And they'll give you their minimums and max in terms of the words. Just a minute. So just one moment. Okay, this is where we are, and we are saying selection of the appropriate journal is very important. And as you select that appropriate journal, there are some checkpoints that you need to have at the back of your mind so that you don't land on the inappropriate journal. Those that we are calling the predatory journals. I may not have a very, very clear definition of these predatory journals because it has been an issue of debate. There are scholars who believe they exist, there are scholars who believe they are non-existent. But how would you know an authentic journal and one that is predatory? The predatory journals are very impressive. You look at them, and if you are not very keen, you may not see the difference between the two. And many times they use names of the well-known journals. Sometimes they will only add one word. For example, International Journal of ABCD. For example, in my area of study, we have the Journal of Agricultural Education and Extension. But if you go online, you'll find so many other journals that are International Journal of Agricultural Education, International Journal of Agricultural Education and Extension, International Journal of this and that. When you look at the way they describe themselves, you should notice some things that are not adding up. Sometimes you even realize their website. If you check their website, It is not a true website. It is a website that could be inactive. And if you are not very sure whether that journal really exists, you need to also look at whether that journal is a member of the DOAJ or a member of the OASP. DOAJ is the Directory of Open Access Journals, and OASP is the Open Access Scholarly Publishing Authority. Alternatively, you can check in this website whether that journal actually exists, and that will keep you off the habit of finding yourself publishing your work in a journal that will not add value to what you really invested your time in researching on. The other way of doing it is by checking their contacts, check the contacts that they are provided in the journal, and see whether they are active and when they were last used. Research on the editorial board, although sometimes the editorial board may be flattering. You may have the editorial board having very qualified persons in the same area, but in actual sense, the board members may not be even aware that they are part and parcel of that journey. Those of us who have published, I'm sure you've received a number of requests to be an editorial member or a reviewer or something in a certain journal. And you fill some forms. Some of them will ask you to fill some forms and you send them back. But my question is, how many of those come back to you? How many of them ever send you their work? And that's why I'm saying it is not funny to find your name in such journals, but you're not even aware. That's how wicked the area of research can be. Then it's also necessary to look at their peer review process and their timelines. Journals will always tell you, once you submit your article or your manuscript, at this time, it will take this number of weeks or this number of days or months to be reviewed. And we will be getting back to you at this time. If you realize that peer review process does not have timelines, then that is an area for worry. Because you want to publish in an article, in a journal where there is peer review. And the peer review should be thorough, such that at the end of the day, your article is better than when you present it. My experience in publishing is that if you are to get quality, you don't submit a manuscript today and tomorrow it is online, or 1 week down the line it is online. Doesn't work like that. The indication there is that that manuscript has not been reviewed. And if we are true to ourselves, personally, when I was publishing my master's papers, I published, yes, but I don't remember any one time when the journals where I had sent them to requested me to make corrections. It was accepted and ready to be published. So pay the publication fees. And most of us have done that. Is it true? Me, I never chose my journals appropriately. Of course, I didn't know the way, so I did it the way I knew at that time. And that is how we let our students to do things the way they did, without guiding. If a paper is to be quality and to be published in the recognized journals with high impact factors, many a times your paper will take 6, 7, and over months. But do we have that patience? Do you have that patience? No. My defense is next month, I want my paper to have been published. Or promotions are next month, I want my 3 papers to be published. So we invest a lot of time in our research, but we do not share the new knowledge.
Even a single person.
Right.
No.
Then that's the thing you need to do. So that
is to read past issues of that journal. Look at what other papers they have published and read. And you'll agree with this. That some of the papers that are already online, you look at them and you see glaring mistakes. Yes? Even font that is not standard. Italics. Some are using Times Roman and calligraphy together. And you ask yourself, was this paper reviewed? And somebody gives you that the font is not, the style, and even the font is not aligned. The formatting errors. And those of you who are in science, you read through and you ask yourself, how possible is this? How possible are these results?
Your powder.
So the quality of the articles already published should send a signal to you, to the kind of journal that is. And then lastly, you can also look at the Bell's list of predatory journals. I do not want to belabor on this. I know this is an area of a lot of yeah? Yes. So someone will ask, how did you then decide that those papers that he came up with are actually predatory? But then the other thing I always tell my students is, if you get a paper and realize that it may not be published in the peer-reviewed journals, can you make use of the references? Because in the references, it may guide you to papers that are in peer-reviewed journals. So you don't trash everything that this is predatory. There is some positive that you can tap from it. Now, here comes the task. I hope we have internet with us. And this time around, I want smaller groups. Such that at the end of this task, in your area of specialization, you have at least 2 journals that you can share with your students. That when you publish your work in epidemiology, this is the right journal. This is the proper journal. Because we have to guide our students appropriately. And we will not guide them appropriately if we are also blind in the process. Yes? So I will request us to be in smaller groups, this time not the big groups we are in. I will wish groups of 3. Then in those groups of 3, we can help one another if we are not in the same area. Yes? Such that you scan through the journals in your area. And through those journals in your area, identify the specific journal you pick. If, for example, in my area, I picked the Journal of Agricultural Education and Extension. What is the scope of that journal? What areas does it cover? What is the aim? What is the philosophy? What is the impact factor? Who are the editorial boards? You may not list the editorial boards, but I would wish you just scan through and try to Google this person with an editorial board in this journal. Who are they? Just look at their what? Their profile, because they are there. They should be there. Then, if you can get a latest article published, read and see whether it is speaking to your area of specialization and whether you could actually publish it. Then the guidelines to others, we may not get into this, but the most important thing is I would wish us to come up with an article or 2 in each of our areas. A journal or 2 in our areas. Is that asking too much? No. Yes? In groups of 3? The way you are? Yeah. But you are too many? No. Oh. Groups of 4? Yeah. We count it? No, the morning groups. No, the ones we are the afternoon groups. Yeah. But allow me to shift some. Yes. Those who are 7 and those who are 6. Yeah. So that we have smaller groups.
Yeah. Which one?
Try as much as possible to form semi-samples. It's always good to work facing one another. People have decided they're coming.
No, you can do them.
This one's a which book is this?
Naona picha imewashinda. Yule mtu amepiga imemchanganya kabisa.
Wamesema gani? Okay, what is it? We have 256 so just go to and go to publish. Astrology has that number.
That is it. About that journals. Next to
give me such articles. These are articles in 6 journals that are relating databases. So the journals, whether you see journals, such journals. So you can now settle on out of those very many.
Defined by language, by your population. Published many of those talk about issues of she's here.
How you say? Uko na password yake? Akaangalia sana. Namba zangu zimekaa na hii na ya hiyo ambayo hata sioni ikihitajika Kisii. Acha nione kama ile sawa kama iko hivyo. Oh, inakaa. Uko na hii ya Kisii University? Ni capital K. Kisii. Yes. Kisii.2018 exclamation mark.
Don't click on it. Should click, then you will start changing. But normally, so long as you pick something from the next that you really don't know. So what happens in traditional journey? Most those that are present, they have taste. So if somebody has to access the item, they have to pay for it, and that reduces.
One of the cases. Yeah, that is just one way. The other way is that I'm still our focus was number 3. Our institutional resources. Kisii has a positive phase for premium journals. You can access let's go to the just take the
Our password is 10-140. That's our username. Yeah, 10, yeah, it's not okay. So this one, if you use one, we'll access that database, we'll access our, we'll access ID, what is for environmental science, and this. Yes, but they are there. You see, absolutely. Then there is no. Yes. So, like when you are in the database, like in the first database, you can see that channel, okay, in your area. Yes. So, can I
just trying to understand this.
Not retrieving a database. My area is it the same across the channels? The names,
what I'm saying is there are people that I can copy that because these two So which one is the thing? How is it?
You have to start with all those
But it is that is whatever the day that you set is not right.
So today we have three static class. You're done. Let the presenter take us. You will continue with the task. Can we first present the presenter is yeah. Oh, she's on? Yeah. But she presented in the other Kindly let's listen to the presenters. I'm presenting. Ours is from George. Science of nursing and practices. We want to compare the scope and the aim and the publishing. This one seems to be the best because there is no cost of publishing. The aims are the critical research articles, knowledge synthesis articles, theoretical discussions and methodology articles, knowledge application articles, and research protocol articles. And so the manuscript may be submitted in English or French, that is if you speak French. They are published in original language along with an abstract in both languages, that is English and French. And you can also, a letter is also accepted to the editor. So it's Dutch, the journals are from Science of Nursing and Health Practices, no post payment when it comes to publication. The aims are read there, the 5 of them. This is the first one.
Yeah, the second one is also from Roach, and it's called Communication to Medicine. Its publication fee is $2,290 US. Yeah. Then it has aims and scope. Maybe I mentioned the scope. It covers all clinical specialties, including oncology, radiology, and neurology, emerging fields, precision medicine, microbiome, and anti-aging therapies. It also has any area of translational research and regional or global public health. I think another section.
Yeah, that's
It has a lot. It has a criteria for publication. The publication process it takes 21 weeks to publish. And then
21 weeks.
21 weeks. Yeah, so,
The next group. But I didn't say you got to look at the video, the publication, but anyway.
Right, let me present what we had in one. We were different people, we have a microbiologist, we have an biotechnologist, we had a immunologist. But since the nurses were away, we decided to do the nursing class. So so we looked at African Journal of Emergency Medicine. It has an impact factor of 3.7. 1.37 as per 2021. Their aim is to be able to support emergency care across Africa with a scope of where they are actually dealing with publishing materials for physicians in emergency medicine and general care. And they have a scope of publishing quality international papers which actually focus on emergency care. They have about 51 editors, and all those editors are spread across about 19 countries. Averagely, a paper takes about 2 months. And there, because I've had people mentioning figures in US dollars, it's about $1,200. So I think that's what we're able to come up with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members. We were group 5, and we decided to look at the American Journal of Hematology. The impact factor was 0.05, that was in 2021, and the publisher is Willie Bliss. Then the scope of practice is to provide a broad coverage of experimental and clinical features of blood diseases in humans and animals. Then the philosophy, okay, it is always published in English. That is what it is. Then we got about 4 guidelines, which included the first one was about the manuscript, which must be submitted first as per their policy. Then 2, the title page should also be presented as per their ethics and integrity policy. Then the co-authors' details and affiliations also have to be stated clearly. And finally, the 14 IDs for the authors. And we also got that they have quite a number of most recent articles, but then we were able to slide about two. The first one is a salvage therapy with basilisumab. Yeah, that's a kind of drug, and etanercept for severe steroid refractory acute graft versus host disease. And this was first published in on 12th of April 2022. And we also have that's what we had. That's what we found out. So with the articles, we found out that they were in that kind of journal, they were in line with the hematology field that we were looking for. Thank you.
You are too tired?
No.
I ask for the presenter. Let this not end here. In your departments, in your faculty, you need to come together and identify those journals that as a department or as a faculty you feel are core to the work of the students. Because it is only you who can guide your students or your supervisee best. Otherwise, they will do what we did. We just published. But now that we know, can we do the right thing? Yes? If we had sufficient time, in those groups, you would identify the journals for each of your colleagues in their areas of specialization. But because we are limited in time, we have done the practice. Now we can cascade it. I'm sure when you are looking through, you must have asked yourself, what is the difference between this journal and this other? Because the names almost look alike. You are almost unable to see where the difference is. But if you get to the nitty-gritties, go to the extent of looking at whether the editors and the board of directors in this is the same as this. What is the impact factor in the two? So you are, and that's why I unpacked that section and asked you to look at those. You may call them tiny details, but they define what the journal is. Are we there? Yeah. I love to rush a bit because time is not on our side. I want to ask to think through fraud and crime practice in publishing. When we think of publishing, we have identified the journal that is going to publish in. What are some of these practices that are unethical? We can refer to them as practices that we refer them as being unscholarly. They are malpractices. And one of them is regarding to predatory publishing. And we have different forms of predation. When you provide information that is misleading, or information that is incorrect, or even information that is out of publication. And fabricating is where we false our data. You know very well, you've not gone to the field, you've not collected data, but at the end of the day, you want to come up with a basis, with some form of cooked data. Or you collected data, but it is not speaking to what you thought was the issue. So you rework it to speak to your issue. And fabrication amounts to malpractice. The lack of peer review. So a malpractice in publishing, you submit your work, it is not peer reviewed. Neither is it
there's no peer review or peer review, depending on the status of the documents. Sometimes we want to co-publish, but even in our co-publishing, we never meet to agree that this is what you want to publish. Sometimes you realize your name is in an article that is online, but you don't know when it was published. Before anything is published and it has your name, you must give your consent to that. Then unclear costs. Sometimes you find that you are publishing in the same journal, but what I'm asked to pay is different from what a publisher, the other person is asked to pay. These costs are hidden, and you will not find them stipulated or laid out in the journal that you want to publish in. They will only ask you to send a publication fee once they've been implied that your article has been accepted. Journals should not hide any publication fee. And if a journal is free to publish, it should be clear that this journal is free to publish. In terms of the services, you look at those websites for each of those journals, and it may be very difficult for you to distinguish between which is an authentic one and which one is not, which is professional and which is unprofessional. And the things that they add are very tiny, like one letter, sorry, just one letter, or even one word, or even some abbreviations. And if you're not keen, you may not notice them. So professional looking websites, you have to, even the language they are using, those like tiny details. And then the issue of preparing the manuscript, is it edited? Do they bother of whether you've edited your manuscript? And that's why even the element of peer review comes in as part of the malpractice. If this is not being done in any journal that you are sending your work to, you have to think first. And you always have the freedom and the liberty to withdraw your paper, as long as the journal has not published. You always have that freedom. Then submission with evidence. There are times when you see those calls being presented that we are publishing articles in this area between this time and this time. But then once you send, you never follow up to get to know whether they published or not. They never come back to you. It's always good practice to ensure that whenever you submit your article, there is evidence that you've actually submitted. They must send you an acknowledgement, at least we have received your article or your manuscript. Then it's always good mannerism to submit your article, the article yourself. Sometimes there are those journals that will ask you for articles, and then there will be a rider down there, although many times we never read these things. We see the call, but we never read to the bottom. There will be a rider there that the article will be submitted. You send to someone who will submit the article on your. How sure are you that the article reaches whatever destination with your names? Yes? How sure are you? It's like, even in the area of research, we are having middlemen in between. Like we have in agriculture, I produce, a middleman comes, buys, goes to. So they have more income than me, the farmer, who is trading on my farm. And that would be what is happening with our work. You share your work, you never get to know what becomes of it, and therefore you never get any returns out of it. Not even the pride of saying, this paper was mine and I published in this article or in this journal. The publication process, it is a journey, and we have to learn to be patient with this journey. It is not a one-touch thing that today I have my paper or my manuscript, tomorrow it is in the journal. Peer-reviewed journals, where we should be publishing, have their timelines, and that's why someone has talked of 2 months. I know if you publish in some of those heavy journals, you will find your article taking 7-8 months, or even more than 1 year. Yes, and that is when you get quality. When they ask you to make corrections 10 times, don't tire, make those corrections, because it is for the betterment of your work. So when you think of this, do a draft, and you work on that draft, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but as many as 5 times, or even more. Ensure that when you are doing this draft, it is not a one-man's business. You engage your peers. Yes? It's also advisable to engage a language editor when your work is ready, and then submit to a journal editor with a cover letter. And this cover letter, remember we said you need some evidence. The cover letter acts as your evidence that you've actually submitted something. And then in return, they must send you an acknowledgement that they have received. Once you send it to the editor, then the editor sends it to the review for review by the experts or the reviewers. And therefore, publication is a process. The editor is only there as the overall, but he or she may not be knowledgeable in each of those disciplines. You notice that those journals have different, their scope is broad. And therefore, the areas they publish in are also different. And to get the experts in this area, you need those editors. You need the reviewers who are experts in it. So when the reviewers are sent these articles, they will review them, and they review them in line with those guidelines that are given or provided in the journal. Often each of those articles, there is something that is reading guidelines to others. You saw it? Guidelines to others. If you don't adhere to those guidelines, that is one of the things that will throw you out. And that's why, even when we are guiding our students, our supervisors, we must explain to them that each of those sections in each of the journal, the board of editors, the previous articles that have been published, the aim, the scope, so that they know which area they are. Sometimes they ask in which subject area. So for you to respond appropriately in subject area, you must be knowing that. Then, most importantly, the guidelines to the author. When I'm tailoring my article to fit in that journal, what should I have in my title? What should I have in my background? What should I have in my statement of the problem? Or how should I present my findings? Because they will always give you all that in a summarized form. There are those journals that are very general and give you a kind of a template or even a dummy publication for you to refer to. So that is very important. So when reviewers are viewing, they will look at all that. Have you complied? And does the article meet their standards? Then they will give you feedback. The feedback will always come in 4 options. Either accept without changes, which is very rare, accept with minor changes, accept with major changes, and that is where most of us lie. Yeah? But if we never chose the right journal, then we expect that the article will be rejected. And there is nothing as demoralizing as receiving a reject. Yes? You get that letter from the editor that thank you for expressing interest in our journal. However, the article
has been rejected.
Has been rejected. The word reject will always be there, and it pierces through you, and you are like, am I this guy? No, it is only a slight mistake that you make. Either you never adhere to their guidelines, or your work is not in line with what their forecast is. And therefore, as researchers, it's not very easy to deal with major changes. Neither is it easy to deal with rejection. Even in life, rejection is very difficult to cope. But in research, we keep saying, you don't leave it at that. It has been rejected, you try elsewhere. Because remember when we were starting, we asked ourselves, what are the options? What other alternatives do you have? Channel A has rejected. What about channel B? You don't just research your work, it is your work. So you need to be aggressive in sharing your findings. And that's why those alternatives are there for you to make maximum use of them. Now, how do I get this feedback? The editor of each of those journals will write you a letter giving you the feedback from the reviewers of the article. And therefore, always ensure that if you have been requested to make corrections, either minor corrections or major corrections, the moment the editor does you a letter, one, it's always courteous to acknowledge the reception of the letter. And then two, it's always good to commit to some timelines. I'm going to make the corrections within this period of time. So you don't just indicate you're going to make corrections and you leave it forever. Because remember, when they made the call, there were timelines. Yes? So even as you give your timelines, make sure your timelines are in line with the timelines that were there in the call. Then rejection can be traumatizing. If not well, received. But we are scholars. Many times our work will be rejected. That does not mean we quit. We hold on. Once you've done our corrections, make sure you commit to your timeline. You had said I'll send back the corrected version on this date. Please stick to that. If you can make it a bit earlier, the better. So meet the resubmission deadline and always resubmit a cover letter. Just like you submitted the first time in the cover letter, every time you speak to your editor, ensure that you have something accompanying your manuscript. It's always good to indicate where changes have been done in the original article, where you've done them, and how you've done them. I always advise my students, even those that I'm teaching, and I had this issue arising in our previous presentation. How do you get to know that someone has worked on the corrections? I'm looking for the black one. This one is a pen. So remember, we sent back those corrections. I usually advise my students to have a T kind of table showing the reviewer comments and their responses. Yes? Reviewer comment number 1 was blah, 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 blah. My response is A, B, C, D. Page this, like this. You get it? Reviewer comment number 2 was this. My response is X, 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 page 3, like this. And therefore, you make the reviewers work very easy. Very, very easy. They may not have to scan through the entire document, reading word for word, trying to trace where they had made corrections, but you are making their work easy. You even make it more appealing to review your work. And even our proposals and our thesis, I always ask my students to prepare this, especially after tests. That is the only way you can account for corrections on each and every aspect that is raised. If somebody says thanks a lot,
I'm also saying that's a compliance report.
It's a compliance report. Yeah, it's part of it. If you're reviewing that work soft copy, you want to see the version that the person has sent and probably the version where you made your comments, because most of these reviews are done online on soft copy. May not be a hard copy. There is a way in which you are able to view your Word documents side by side. Yes? Yes. And it makes your work easy. So you have the old document where you have your comments as a supervisor, and you have the reviewed document where the student or the supervisee has done the corrections.
And you can check if this was in the background, these are the comments I have done. Are these comments addressed in the background in the reviewed document? So you view them side by side, and you can easily pick out what has been addressed and what has not been addressed. And that is how you come to the most of them accept all the corrections, delete all the comments, they send it back to you. And let's have that tendency of reviewing back. What are I want these students to do? Even if they come back 2 years down the line, can you fetch the earlier version and look at them side by side? Then when you're responding to scholar, the reviewers for the comments from the reviewers, it's always advisable you do it in a scholarly way. The language that you use, let it be as scholarly as possible. Sometimes you may get comments that are not very palatable. Comments that are, to you, you would look at them and ask, sure. We know the language sometimes you accept. It may not be very nice enough, but from your end, you turn down, because at the end of the day, you are a scholar and you must communicate in a scientific and scholarly language for that case. If the article is accepted, if your paper is accepted, a letter, you will receive a letter from the editor. Always that is what will happen. And then if it is not free to publish, then they will ask you to make some payments. Many times the payment is charged by the number of pages. Some of them will charge you page by page, others will charge you by that's between this page to this page, between 1 and 50 pages, these are the charges. 51 to 100, these are the charges. And there are those that will charge you page, that every page is this is US dollars. So it depends on the journal. Then always ensure that when the article is published, many of those journals will only publish your article after you've done the payment. Is it true? Yeah. So sometimes we get the letter from the editor that our article has been accepted for publishing, but we are not, maybe you are not financially able at that time to make the payment, and therefore because you are in that state, you just keep quiet. It is always necessary to communicate back. I am not in the position to pay the money now, the fee now, but I'll do it at this time. Yes, communication, and that was mentioned, is very critical. If you have the money, then you pay. What is it that these reviewers look at in your article for them to take you through the process that we just mentioned? They will assess your article in terms of the image of the journal. What is it that they expect in the journal in terms of the aims, the scope? Does your article fit within that? Does your article speak to the philosophy and the aim of the journal? And does it is it part and parcel of the topics that you want to cover and even their research design? Because many times they don't give you that. It will also be decided depending on the positioning of that article in that discipline. Is it well positioned? Is it a continuation of the story? Remember to say, when you are publishing, you are doing a conversation. So is your conversation in line with what they are communicating? Wow. And when we write, and especially those of us in science, it's very important to ensure that we have our area in mind. What language, what terms have we learned to use? That article that is published is read by people who are in the area.
section, we look at the two kinds of data. Or quantitative, or even theoretical articles covering different areas depending on my area of specialization. The theoretical articles will give you a variety, but the majority of us here, we like the first area. Your research article must have several sections, but these sections are not tied to, they are not static. They will change depending on the article. What does the number expect? The number that you find, they're asking you to provide theoretical framework and conceptual framework, which are not static. So you think of things depending on the number. Then someone is asking, need to mention something for the intellectual property, right? Connect to why we touch. And that's why we say that one of the reasons why we touch, we do it to ensure that nobody gets advantage of our work. Because if you touch, you associate yourself. That's me. There are so many rights when it comes to intellectual property, and even what other people can be able to do with one mass and the extension of it. I wish you had the time to also different forms of licenses. One of the moment
what are the around my work normally is online sources, the journals, the databases, and then starting to as a student or even as a lecturer, once you will be publishing your work, there's some steps you're supposed to follow. And currently the university policy for you to be able to pass your thesis or master's dissertation must be below 20 or below. If you are past 20, your work will not be accepted. Some other publishers from different journals usually accept 10%, 15%, depends on the distribution. Currently, Kisii University uses study to check the quality of the work which has been done either PhD, we use several software such as you have the judgment channel, but quality is the best. It's one of the best. Currently in Kenya, around 90% of Kenyan institutions use quality, which the university has built and have access. So for you to access this quality, you can be able to access through your supervisors or lecturers who have credentials to use quality to check the work. So that's if you have an account, so I can show you briefly the front. This is for my ends. You can be able to see that there's some red markings, which shows the potassium percentage is too high, which cannot be accepted anywhere. What way this is when you are running the quality there are normally some settings which you are supposed to set, such that the work is not submitted to the repository or the database of the quality. As a student, we've had cases whereby students have been going to do their work through the cyber. There is advantage in the cyber. Once you do your work, you will see the cyber. It will send to those institutions, mostly the American universities, British universities, the work will go there. So when you are defending your master's or your PhD, and when we run it, we will find 100% showing that work has been published. So you won't proceed, you won't graduate, and you won't proceed. To remove an article from that university, the us to where did you get the credentials to run the document in our credentials. So we've had cases like that. Like another student previously had a case like that. So the process took almost like 3 years for me to be able to proceed and graduate. So in case you need to run it, you can access this software. You can be able to, it's online. It's not really to install. So the library can be able to do for you and check for free, of course. Or your supervisors will check for you to see how the percentage is, then you can be able to make the corrections. You can be able to see this is one of the work. This was one of our students. You can be able to see the percentage came to 79%, submitted to Doctoral University. So that student had to ensure that Doctoral University has removed that article from Doctoral University for us to allow you to graduate. So you can see the way this currency, the checking plagiarism can bring you issue. But in case of anybody, you can always place it to the ICT or the library, which will be able to assist you, and your supervisors have access to that team. So when you're doing your thesis, the journal articles, which your supervisors, the library of the ICT, we have for you for free. And you can see this one, it shows you where it's showing the article has been plagiarized from. That's why we have Kisii University 20. As long as it's 20, what will be good. Because nowadays, once you submitted your will be sent to your emails. Maybe to guide you in the process, how you're going to go about it. That's the question. When you're setting up your credentials, you normally see settings, let me go and show you on how to be able to set a fancy account in a way that you want to select. You can see on 19, I'm getting it on class. Wait, this is my end. So once you created your class, you can be able to come to and be able to come to settings. Obviously, the settings, you give the settings there. You can see here on this place, it's showing submit papers. So when you run it, before you run, you choose do not submit to the repository. You say no repository. Such that when you run, you don't submit to the targeting repository. No matter how many times you run, it will not show it as a document which has been entered somewhere. So you change it from the but you can be able to do that for you. And also maybe ask and research. Maybe you future also more detailed workshop on how to be able to run those aspects. Thank you. Start from there. Whoever has no targeting account can be able to send their credentials using the university email, the corporate email, personal corporate email of the university. I think I can give you an email address whereby you can send the subject of the email can be targeted credentials. Yes. It's library, all of them are small. Library at Kisii University.ac.ke. The subject is targeted conventions. So send using your corporate email, and also don't forget to send us your PDF number. That's such that we can be able to create for you an account for those who don't have. And we can also be able to send to you some tutorial videos of how to be able to access and use that.
Give us also your number.
Also, you can also be able to send. You can be able to send to WPay.10. That's why WPay.10 at Kisii University.
Right.
Okay. So it is WPay.10. That is my number. In case you have any clarification, you can be able to call me anytime. So, thank you.
Is that a fight?
Yeah.
That's a 575.
Yes, 0725753338. Now, participants are present. Come to the end of this workshop. And my observation is that it was very useful, very interactive. Yeah, we were using the evaluation forms. Because you have something to say, and you benefited, and you like this program to be implemented. But I want to think it was very good. It's one of the best workshops we have ever had in this university. You want to have one people here? Members, you want to have one people I know. This are tired now, but the topics were key. We have enjoyed. Issues of application is an issue. Most people use it to promote lecturers. I think at this point you already know how to go about publishing your article.
Because when you get to a wrong target, you waste yourself, you waste the data. Even one thing that management now is typically analyzed where you look at where you publish, and based on these parameters that the client was discussed about, you get direct marks or you get the targets. And soon you will realize that you have wasted a lot of information because you have put your information in the wrong channels. How I wish that this can be. I wish that all lecturers be able to get what was discussed today. You must be lucky that this time was here and you were able to interact. You are now able to understand where you put your data. Let us not waste our papers by publishing on different channels. You submit today, tomorrow you are told that you are published, and your paper is well written, and benefited of the same, and then save this amount of money so that you publish the paper. How one day, are you sure that the person who is writing that? Then your paper, I am sure you give you a new language. So that topic was whoever chose it. I requested to share the slides because I want to give you a goal of your objective is to ensure that people understand what they are doing. As far as publishing is concerned, so that at least publish quality all storage channels. Family members, I don't want to tire you. I know you are very tired. It's here at the end of the day, although you are really benefited. I saw a number of us online. So at the end, we don't advertise this workshop so well. Yes. This is a workshop we never advertised. If you are done it well, you are well with the numbers. But with the slides, and you will be able to share. And one of these days, we will go into bad. You know, don't underrate ranges. Don't underrate matters. Like in the morning, what you said about condition, touch the what people are doing. And I wish all of them. How I wish that all of them were not to understand what you are saying. We could be people of the community who remove students to the next level. Let the students discover them. We know exactly what they say and what they discuss. So I think at this point, we need to appreciate the supervisors. Where is Dr. The other supervisor? The other supervisor. Dr. Baby, we have not interacted. When you are presenting, I was out. So we didn't even I know they have come from very far. I think Baby is from Nigeria. Is from Nigeria, where I was a student, master, bachelor's and master. But I was poor supervisor. I was poor supervisor until I say that I would never get back to university. The time I went and I left the door, I never came back. Most of the two guys who supervised me. Unfortunately, I keep on meeting them here. And they are very shy because they know the question. I finished my master's in 2004. But it is because of their poor condition that I never registered until 2011. I said I would never go to any university, considering the kind of solution I got. So I got to Western. And then I said, no, let me just arise and do what? Shine. For my right as come. So I had to wake up and then registered in the University of Nairobi, where I was supervised by Professor Biwo, a father who was accessible, he was always in the office. Accessibility is the greatest challenge. And when you meet him, when you meet a supervisor will tell you, I don't have time. Where's your document? I'm not ready. And then that is enough. They just leave and leave you there. And that is the kind of challenges. I don't know whether that is what informed you to come up with this kind of thing. I don't know what to tell you. I don't want to tell you so I'm going to go and tell them. So you want to react? No, I was just fine. I know you want to react. Other supervisors are good.
What is it break for? You can make or break our own students. Yes. We share this. I have my own challenges, but one thing I always appreciate is one of my supervisors taught me something on time management. I don't know what your learners learn from me as a supervisor. And when they see what they see, on whom they see, yes, when they see, what do they see whom they see? What is it that they can learn from? Time management I learned from one of the supervisors was by that time at TBC. And so the only time I could see them was very early in the morning, before 7. And that was for me to come to get to the office of a TBC. If today I was free to say, I don't know how to manage. You know, during certain times, God gives you sufficient grace to go through a certain aspect. Yes, and that's what I want to do. And then, yes, I did not finish what I wanted to say about supervision because it is quite broad. I trained for this for 3 months. So I'm sure I had quite a lot. But one more thing that I want us to take home, that's all of you share. Postgraduate studies is a very long journey, And you look at the students and you realize most of them study when they are mothers or when they are fathers or when they are working, they have many other responsibilities. And the only person who can understand what they are going through is you, the supervisor, because you've taken the same journey. So when we supervise them, I'm kind of thinking that let's have a third eye of a mentor, a coach, and someone who can at times listen to them. You don't listen to everything, but you choose what you want to listen for the better of that student. So that learning journey needs somebody to walk the journey with them. Who can they share? Because sometimes my husband may not understand what I'm going through in my academic journey. My wife may not understand. Other people go home and they're like, what we eat? I've been frustrated the whole day. So sometimes families break because of academics. As supervisors, can we take our position and ensure that these learners go through and graduate?
All right, as you supervise, you will take care of your project.
Yes.
All right, this is a powerful read, and why you don't have size? You get more food. At least by the way. Anyway, what I've just learned from her is that she had a lot of information. She has a lot of information. She was not able to cover what everything. But as a university and as a research, we are all going for another workshop, which will be advertised well, and then we will invite you to come back. Please don't let us down. You have already told us you have the information. We are all going to invite you back. She has been very friendly, isn't it?
Yes.
Wow, I wish you were my supervisor. I would have done my thing from that. At this point, why can't we just appreciate Dr. Meke? We appreciate Dr. Jure for the good work done. Huh? Jure or what? Why? So it's not found here. So we don't know whether it is true. What is it? True. Anyway, don't teach me the semantics here now. At this point, let us appreciate them. They have been very good to us. But before we appreciate them, I want to also thank you for being patient. And I want to reiterate that the School of Health Science, you have done well for the first time.
Oh, we have done well always. We are number 3 in Africa.
Yeah. I've not seen you writing very many proposals. Anyway, that is just to challenge you, but you have done well. I don't want to use the word bad, but you have done well. It has been very good, very interactive, lovely. There is some aspect of equity and equality, ladies are here and men. So it has been very good. You can see how your students are very happy. They are very happy. You see how they are happy? And they now want to clap for you. Take it serious. When they are clapping for you, they mean it. It is not for the sake. They mean that they are benefited. And we are going to welcome you back again. In fact, between now and others, you would have bounced back here at Kisii University, and we will even have a bigger forum physically. Thank you so much. We now want to do, okay, as we have the questions before we go for questions.
Let me guide the appreciation.
Yes, please. Yes, please, Doc. Every time. Please come. I'm not even good in that.
Yes, because facilitators are so awesome. Don't need to do this the very usual way they used to. And because they are trained and they might need mosquitoes and go, we want to kill mosquitoes, yes. And these mosquitoes might be underneath, they might be flying all over. So we are going to look for them, we catch and we farm with you, right? We keep them. Yeah, so we start underneath. And also we can do it. Yeah, we can start. Yes, are we ready?
Yes.
Yeah, so mosquitoes, they make sound, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can look for that sound underneath and all around us. So we go down, come up, all around us, all around. Let's burn. Burn. Thank you.
It's so small. Okay, thank you so much. There is tea. Let's now take tea and have a simple journey. Thank you. And God bless.
You're very interesting.
One time, I was the first assistant, the whole of Namibia, which was the whole of the country. Not the first assistant.
Some supervisors, when you talk to them,
The only first assistant.
you write on a paper.
Yeah, you can't like masters. Nice. Kusi walikuwa wanaomba only good masters. I was so frustrated, so I never went back.
Natural Buddha.
And invested in me, but the problem is, I could see a professor. I will be working for the seats like this. Please.